What's up, guys? It's MTMUMact for you, back with another video for you guys, and today I'm giving you my honest first impressions on the new card spoil for Innistrad Crimson Vow. So today was the review stream, and we've already got some spoilers for the upcoming expansion, and I want to give you my first impressions. So let's jump right into the action. And it's not a lot of cards, but I've simply ordered them from common up to mythic to keep things interesting. And I'll go through these rather quickly. Let's actually zoom in here and start with Apprentice Sharpshooter. 3-mana human archer, 1/4 with reach and training. So training is a new mechanic for the humans in Innistrad Crimson Vow. And training says, whenever this creature attacks with another creature with greater power, put a 1/1 counter on this creature. So this mechanic we more or less already know from the Mentor mechanic, from the most recent Ravnica block, where Mentor was if a creature has Mentor and it attacks together with another creature, if the other creature has less power, you can put a 1/1 counter on it. And this basically works the other way around. A creature attacking that has training needs another creature that has higher power, and if that's the case, you can put a 1/1 counter on it. So the Sharpshooter right here obviously is meant for draft, nothing for constructed. And as we'll see later, creatures sometimes have additional triggers when training triggers, so that could be interesting. From my first impression, training could be just like an easy way mechanically wise to have creatures get continuous 1/1 counters, but it's dependent on other creatures being on the board. So I could imagine training being a mechanic that just by accident triggers, depending on your deck building. Mono green is a big deal right now, so we'll see how this mechanic works out. Next up we got Griff Rider, 3-mana, 2/1 with flying and also with training. Not much to say about that, also just for draft. Next we got Gluttonous Guest, 3-mana, 1/4. It's a vampire, obviously vampire is going to be a big theme in Crimson Vow. And this also highlights a new mechanic, so to say, which is blood tokens. So this says when Gluttonous Guest enters the battlefield, create a blood token. And a blood token is an artifact with pay 1, tap, discard a card, sacrifice this artifact, draw a card. So for 1 mana you get to loot, or to rummage, more to say. And it says whenever you sacrifice a blood token, you gain 1 life. And this is a big theme with blood tokens that when you do sacrifice them, or when there's several blood tokens on the board, you can get additional effects. So we really have to see how good this is. This seems to be a vampire specific mechanic. I think it's a very cool idea. It makes the tribal aspect much more interesting than the usual, you got your general type creature which gives all the creatures of the same type +1/+1. This is very different and I like it. And also, obviously, you can have synergies with discarding cards into your graveyard. So, blood tokens seem fairly interesting at first impression. And then we got another common Rot-Tide Gargantua, 5-mana, 5/4 with Exploit. So Exploit is back. Pretty nice mechanic who says when this creature enters the battlefield, you may sacrifice a creature. And then when you do sacrifice a creature, you get an additional effect. In the case of Rot-Tide Gargantua, it is when Rot-Tide Gargantua exploits a creature, each opponent sacrifices a creature. So nothing too exciting here, but I do think Exploit is a real cool mechanic. Obviously, if you have synergies by sacrificing other creatures, this gets even better. And it's just a cool little mechanic. Really happy to see it. And another common here, Wary Prisoner, 4-mana, 2/6 human werewolf with Daybound. So Daybound, Nightbound is also to be found in Innistrad Crimson Vow Defender. And then on the flip side is the 6/6. Nothing much to really talk about. I think this won't make the cut in a werewolf deck. So really not much to say here. And another common, which is actually not too bad. It's Massive Might, 1 mana for green. It's an instant. Target creature gets +2/+2 and trample until end of turn. Boosting and trample together is really useful. This will be mostly for draft, but I think in draft this could be a really cool pump spell, especially because of the trample. Get in there for the last bits of damage. But apart from that, what's this card called? There's this 1-mana instant in green that simply gives a creature trample and then you draw a card from Strixhaven, which was sometimes played with Magecraft types of decks, right? Maybe this would find a home in those types of deck, but right now there is no such decks to be found in meta, so this won't see any playing constructed either. Another common here with draw score infantry, 2-mana 2/2 with Disturb, so another mechanic returning from Innistrad Midnight Hunt. I do like the Disturb mechanic a lot, it's just like a flashback for creatures, but this time they're doing things a little bit different, because here on the front side you simply got a 2-mana 2/2 creature, but then if you play the Disturb cards, it actually comes back as an aura that gives a creature +2/+2. So I really like that they're changing up on what a card that was cast with Disturb can be, and it can be an aura, which I think is a real cool idea. Next, I've got a Wedding Invitation, real cool art here. 2-mana artifact, when enters the battlefield, draw a card. So 2-mana artifacts that simply draw a card when entering the battlefield have actually seen play in the past with Doom Foretold decks. Obviously that's not a thing anymore, but if sacking just permanents on the battlefield becomes relevant again, this is a card to keep in mind. And it's got the active ability to sack it. Target creature can be blocked this turn. If it's a vampire, it also gains lifelink until the end of turn. I don't think it's gonna make the cut, even with a vampire travel deck, but it cycles itself and you make a creature unblockable. It's not too bad, actually. Alright, now we're getting into the uncommon territory. And this card, I think, could definitely see it play. It's Geistlight Snare, 3-mana instant in blue. This spell costs 1 less to cast if you control Spirit. It also costs 1 less to cast if you control an enchantment. Counter target spell unless its controller pays 3. So what this means is that if you control both an enchantment and Spirit, if for just 1 blue mana you counter a spell unless its controller pays 3, which is obviously very, very powerful. Now, you can build, there are building blocks there for a Spirit tribal deck, in which case you would definitely put this card in there, because even at 2 mana this is quite decent, right? 2 mana, counter a spell, and its controller pays 3. We are definitely getting more spirits with Innistrad Crimson Vow, so maybe a Spirit tribal deck could be pushed a little bit more in the right direction, and Geistlight Snare definitely would be a huge part of pushing it, right? Because it's a really nice, efficient counter spell that can counter anything, which is excellent. For the enchantment part, for now in Standard, people don't really play enchantments. I'm trying to think of one. Well, people play, what's it called? Is it called Skeleton Invasion? From Adventures in Forgotten Realms, right? The 5-mana enchantment that lets you spawn skeletons. But for that type of deck, you're mostly in Golgari colors. You don't really see Sultai decks with that kind of deck. So, I don't know, if people regularly play an enchantment, this could just be also a nice card in a control deck. 2 mana, counter anything unless the controller plays 3. Just like a 2-off, maybe you replace a negate with this. Could be a really nice card. Let's get Vercel Stinger, 3-mana 3/2 Death Touch with Exploit. It's a zombie scorpion. And when it exploits a creature, target player draws 2 cards and loses 2 lives. So this card right here can potentially, for 3 mana you get a 3/2 on the board, you sack like a decayed zombie, and then you draw 2 cards and lose 2 lives. That actually doesn't sound too bad. But I do wonder if it makes a cut. I mean, you can sacrifice stuff like a Shambling Ghast, right? Like an Eye Twitch. You get a Death Toucher, which can block anything, which is really nice. Like trade with anything, and then you draw 2 and lose 2 life. Actually doesn't seem too bad. Especially if you want to sacrifice the creatures, as I said, with Shambling Ghast, Eye Twitches, maybe get more stuff to sacrifice. I wouldn't say this card is completely bad, right? Actually, Felslinger could be playable. Next up, I just put one of these in here, but the cycle of dual lands we started in Innistrad Midnight Hunt got completed, and I'm so happy about this. It's amazing. So this is the Ordos one, right? They all have the same clause, and the battlefield tapped unless you control 2 or more other lands. And then you got a really nice dual lands, and we got the Isa dual land, Golgari dual land, Boros dual land, and Simic dual land. So this is going to make Standard so enjoyable for the next 2 years to play, because we're going to have excellent dual lands in the format, which enable 3 color decks, even 4 color decks maybe, and it's just a joy to see lands like these introduced in the Standard. I'm very happy about these. Next I've got another land here, Voldaron Estate. It's a land, you tap it for colorless mana, or you tap it, pay 1 life, add 1 mana of any color, spend this mana only to cast a vampire spell. Or pay 5 mana, tap it to create a blood token. This ability costs 1 less to activate for each vampire control. So this is a land that can produce some blood tokens, which we'll still have to see, but there might be enough synergies that might be really powerful. Especially because this gets reduced by the number of vampires in control, and most importantly, you can activate the blood token ability at instant speed, right? Like, I would say beginning with this year, with expansion from this year, like for Strixhaven and Adventures in the Four Golden Realms, you saw this clause a lot of time which says activate this ability only as a sorcery. This doesn't have it, right? Which makes it a lot better. And, you know, I think it's realistic to say that if you're playing a vampire deck, at any given point you might have like 3 vampires on board, in which case this just costs 2 mana. And if you have synergies with blood tokens or just with having permanence on the battlefield, this can be potentially really good. Apart from that, I think the pay 1 life to add 1 mana of any color will probably not be too relevant. Because I imagine that you play vampires in Rakdos colors, in which case it's not that hard to play a 2-color deck, right? It's fairly easy. So Voldaron Estate could just be a nice utility land in a vampire tribal deck, or in just a deck that wants to make blood tokens, but obviously it makes more sense with vampires. And then you get an untapped land that can fix your mana even, and the question simply becomes, would you rather have a Voldaron Estate in your deck, or would you rather have a manland in your deck, right? This is a question that can only be answered if we see the full set and see how good blood tokens become. But so far I think it's a really cool utility land. Next I've got Dig Up, which I think is a super cool card, and I love this design. So Dig Up, 1 mana sorcery in green. And I'm gonna read the original text first. Okay, it says, search your library for a basic land card, reveal it, put it in your hand, and shuffle. And then it's got this new mechanic, Cleave, which is for, I think it's only for instant sorceries, as far as I remember from the review stream. So Cleave says you may cast a spell for its cleave cost. If you do, remove the words in square brackets, in which case Dig Up becomes search your library for a card, put it in your hand, then shuffle. Which is, I love this card. First of all, I think Cleave is a really cool mechanic, like the idea of just removing parts of sentence from the rule stacks. I think it's really cool and really elegant. And the card itself is it's definitely worth taking a look at, because, you know, in the early game you draw this, you cycle this for a basic land, you hit the land drops, which is really nice. Could even be nice in a multicolor deck. You know, you fix, like you're in a 3-color deck, you fix some mana by digging up the 1 basic land you didn't have yet in the specific color, and you fix your mana. And then later in the game, for 4 mana, you get to cheer up any card in your deck, any card, put it in your hand and shuffle. I think that's really cool. Especially the cleave cost is in Golgari colors, and from the standard we know so far, especially the standard before the championship, right, where it wasn't only about Izzet and everything, Golgari decks were quite popular, quite powerful, and, you know, just have like 2 dig ups in there. These decks also tend to have a lot of mana. And for those decks, if you're in late game, just dig up another Renin 7. Dig up your Assica's Chariot. Or even like dig up maybe as a single copy of, what is it called? Enter the Infinite? No, that's wrong. Like there's this Golgari 7 mana instant, right? That lets you exchange your hand with your graveyard. I forgot it, but you get the point, right? In the late game, this is really nice to get this one specific card. Maybe even play this in Sultai. You 2-drop your Orange Epiphany. I really like this card. I think the clean mechanic is super elegant. I would love to see a lot more cards with this mechanic. And I think Dig Up is great. Okay, how are we doing on time here? Alright, next up we got Overcharged Malice. Also, one of my favorite cards of today's spoilers, 4 mana 3/3 with Flash and Flying, Zombie Horror, and it's got Exploit. When this creature enters the battlefield, you may sacrifice a creature. When Overcharged Amalgam exploits a creature, counter target spell, activated ability, or triggered ability. So this counters anything. Counters any spell, activated ability, trigger ability. It's a very powerful effect. Especially if on top of that you get a 3/3 flyer with Flash. I mean, obviously you need Flash for this to work, but this card seems very powerful, and we have seen, you know, in Dimir colors, we have seen this decayed mechanic with zombies, which I don't think was too, you know, too powerful, too popular, but this is like the exploit mechanic is definitely the reason to take a closer look on the decayed mechanic at those useless zombies and just use them to, you know, have them sit on the board, and when the right time comes, you drop your Overcharged Amalgam, you sacrifice your zombie, you counter that annoying spell, and then on top of that you got a 3/3 flyer on the board. I think this seems super great, super amazing. Even without zombies, like, you can have a Dimir control deck, you can have your loaves in there, right? Your shambling gas and so forth, your eye twitches. You have creatures in there that you want to sacrifice anyway, and then you put some copies of Overcharged Amalgam in there, and you have a really, really good counter spell. Because right now, Standard doesn't have a counter spell that counters activated or triggered abilities. We just don't have that, right? And that's amazing. I really love this card. I think this card could be really, really powerful, especially because of the fact that in a worst case situation, this becomes a 4 mana counter spell, right? Because you can flash it in, it can sacrifice itself, and then you can still get the counter ability. So in the worst case scenario, you can sacrifice itself to counter spell, or if you just need to get in there as a control deck for the last bits of damage, just flash this in at your opponent's end step, and you got a 3/3 flyer. You don't need to exploit, it's a May ability. So really, really powerful, nice creature right here. Next up we got a reprint, and wow, what a reprint. So if you have read the Maro teasers for Crimson Vow, he wrote on those teasers that there will be a reprint of a very popular and very powerful Innistrad card from the past, and I think he regarded Fire Garden of Flame is back. 2 mana to 1 human soldier with first strike, non-creature spells cost 1 more to cast. I think, like right now, mono white is already very powerful, and just imagine you have a turn 2 Thalia, a turn 3 Raidane. Your opponent's non-creature spells above 4 mana, they're just done, right? They cost 3 more to cast. Like an Orange Epiphany becomes 9 mana if it's foretold. If it's not foretold, it's 10 mana. And this is still a really good creature, right? 2 mana to 1 first strike is fairly decent. So Thalia has already proven itself to be a very powerful card, and I mean, Monomite is already a thing, and this just makes it better, really. I mean, Mono White has so many nice options at 2 mana. They have this Spirit Creature Token producing 2-drop right from Kaldheim. We have Declare It that puts 1/1 counters on creatures. Now we have Thalia. It's a really good time to be a white weenie deck, and I mean, Thalia, it's an amazing card. Next I've got Voldaron Bloodcaster, 2 mana, 2/1 vampire wizard with flying. And when it or another non-token creature you control has, create a blood token. Alright, so more blood tokens here, and whenever you create a blood token, if you control 5 or more blood tokens, transform Voldaron Bloodcaster. And then you transform it into Bloodbath Summoner. It's a 3/3 vampire wizard with flying. And it says at the beginning of combat on your turn, up to 1 target blood token you control becomes a 2/2 black bat creature with flying and haste, in addition to its other types. So this right here for Vampire Trial deck seems like a really nice 2-drop, because it's a 2-mana 2/1 flyer. It's not super amazing, right? But it's aggressively statted, right? You have 2 power, so it can get in for some damage, and it's the flyer, so it has evasion. That's already really, really nice. And then you have this clause that can make you some blood tokens, and then if you got 5 more blood tokens, which probably is not too hard to achieve, right? With a Vampire Trial deck, you transform it into a 3/3 that makes the blood tokens into a 2/2, right? With haste. So I could see this in a Vampire Trial deck to be one of the key ingredients to make it really nice and powerful, right? Because presumably a Vampire Trial deck would be pretty aggressive. And I think this is a really well-designed card, right? At the worst, 2-mana 2/1 flyer. Not super great, but it can get in there for damage pretty consistently. And then if other stuff dies, you make your blood tokens, and eventually becomes a 3/3 that gives you a bat, and it can swing for 5 damage in the air. So Voldaron Bloodcaster, I think, seems like a very decent, very powerful card for Vampire Tribal. Next up, we've got Dorothea, Vengeful Victim. 2-mana 4 for an Azorius Carlos. Legendary creature spirit flying. When it attacks or blocks, sacrifice it at end of combat. Okay, so you get a 2-mana 4 for flyer, but after its first use, more or less, it gets sacrificed. And it's got a disturb mechanic, and it comes back as an enchantment aura. You enchant a creature, and the enchanted creature has, whenever this creature attacks, create a 4/4 white spirit creature token with flying that's tapped and attacking, sacrifice a token at end of combat. So, on the back side, or like the disturb side, you put this on to a creature of yours, and then whenever the creature attacks, you basically get another Dorothea in the air, which is very powerful, right? Yeah, I think in the Spirit Tribal deck, this obviously goes in there. Very powerful, like the enchantment aura is very powerful, obviously. And on the front side, it's a 2-mana 4/4 that can swing or block once. I think this is still fairly decent, because think about it this way. Right now, the meta is either, like on the top end, we've got our Is It Control list with Honest Epiphany, which there needs to be an answer for in Crimson Vow, or it needs to be banned, otherwise the standard meta is going to be too stale for sure. But then on the lower end, you've got mono green aggro and mono white aggro. That's basically it, right? So imagine you're playing like a Spirit deck, Spirit Tribal deck, or even like a control deck, a Azorius control deck. You put this out at 2 mana as a 4/4. This can block pretty much anything your mono green deck puts out at turn 2 or 3, right? On turn 2 they play their Werewolf Pack Leader, which is 3/3. Turn 3 they play their Overgrowth Troll, which is a 4/4, right? And Dorothea can trade with both of those, and then they get sacrificed. And then later in the game, if you have a efficient way or an easy way to consistently make tokens in your deck, however you're going to do that, you can just enchant those tokens with Dorothea's Retribution and then really get in for damage every turn, right? Every turn you get this extra 4/4, basically like a Sarah Angel that attacks in the air on your opponent. So Dorothea, I think, is very cool, very interesting, and it probably won't make the cut in control decks. That's just an idea of mine. But in Spirit decks, most certainly it will find its way. Next up, we got Cigar the Summons. 6 mana enchantment white. Creatures you control with 1/1 counters on them have base power and toughness 4/4, have flying, and are angels in addition to their other types. So this enchantment leans into this 1/1 counter theme. I think they start with Kefilda in Midnight Hunt, right? Which is the 2 mana human that can put 1/1 counters on all your other creatures. And we obviously have some other 1/1 counter synergies or like themes going on in Selesnya. But overall, right now, I don't see 1/1 counters or like a counter stack being that big of a thing in Standard at all. And at 6 mana, man, is this pricey. Like, if this didn't have the 1/1 counter clause, if this just made your creatures 4/4 flyers, which are angels, I think this would be a really cool card. But with this clause that your creature needs to have a 1/1 counter, I think this card is pretty much unplayable. It's a very cool card, right? And it can actually be kind of a finisher. Because if you think about it, if you're like, your creatures with 1/1 counters have base power and toughness 4/4, which means that the 1/1 counters they already have, they are put on top of those 4/4 stats, right? So if you have like you're an aggressive counters board and you bring your opponent down to like, let's say 10 life, you can play this as a finisher. 6 mana, boom, you have 2 creatures on the board with 1/1 counters. And they're gonna be both at least a 5/5, right? Because they only transform in a way if they have 1/1 counter on it, and then you can finish your opponent in the air. So this could be a finisher, but at the end of the day, I don't see this happening. Not really. Yeah, I think this card is pretty much unplayable. It's a cool fun card, it's a cool flavor card, but for Standard Contractors, I don't see this being played. Next up, we've got By Invitation Only. Real cool, flavorful card. 5 mana sorcery in white. Choose a number between 0 and 13. Each player sacrifices that many creatures. Now, the first time I read this card, I was a little bit confused because I guess for me, as a Standard player that hasn't been playing Magic Standard for too long, for a little over 2 years, a little longer, I don't necessarily associate white with sacrificing stuff. For me, this is more like a black thing to do, Golgari type thing to do, Rakdos type thing to do. But I do realize that there are quite some sacrifice effects in white, as long as they make players equal, more or less, right? And this is one of those effects because both players need to sacrifice those creatures. Yeah, what's to say about this card? This is just another Doomscar that can't be foretold, right? It's a Doomscar for 5 mana because it's rarely going to be a case that your opponent has more than 13 creatures on the board, so anytime you cast this, it's just a board wipe, right? It's just choose whatever you want, and then all your opponent's creatures get sacrificed. What's interesting is this gets around indestructible because of the sacrifice clause, but this is just another board wipe. Like white already has Doomscar, and it's got this new board wipe from Midnight Hunt, right, for 8 mana that gets reused for each creature on the board, which probably most of the time comes out at the same rate. Like the Midnight Hunt board wipe, you will probably mostly cast it for 5 mana, 4 mana. This is always 5 mana, and I don't know what to really say about this card. I think white already has enough board wipes. If you really want a lot of board wipes in your control deck, I could see yourself playing like 4 Doomscars and 2 By Invitation Only, right? But that's basically it. That's all I have to say about this card. It's a good, decent card if you want extra board wipes. Doomscar is better. Yeah, what's more to say about that? It's a good card. Next I've got Demonic Bargain. 3 mana sorcery in black. Exile the top 13 cards of your library, then search your library for a card. Put that card in your hand and shuffle. So this is just a tutor, right, with a downside of exiling top 13 cards of your library. I think that's pretty terrible. This won't see play in Standard at all. The downside is actually really huge. You might exile the card that you're looking for, and a 3 mana tutor. There's no real like combo deck in Standard. I mean, there's the Epiphany copying deck, obviously, but you find your pieces there simply by drawing cards and not by exiling your deck. Besides, this is in black, so what am I even talking about? So yeah, terrible card in my book. Next we got Anja, Maid of Dishonor. So we got a Legendary Vampire here. 4 mana 4/5 Rakdos Vampire. Really good, really solid stats, right? 4 mana 4/5 is very decent. So whenever Anja, Maid of Dishonor, and or one or more other vampires enter the battlefield under your control, create a blood token. This ability triggers only once each turn, so as you see, more ways to make blood tokens, right? Repeatedly, she comes into a blood token herself, and then you can pay 2, sack another creature or a blood token. Each opponent loses 2 life and you gain 2 life. I think her activated ability is actually pretty strong. You can sacrifice blood tokens, right? Drain your opponent for 2, gain 2 is actually very significant. We know this from the static ability of the Liliana Planeswalker, that draining your opponent for 2, you gain 2, that's a huge swing in life points, right? That can become really nasty really fast. And you even have the option to sacrifice another creature. If you need that, you can do that, right? And I think this card can just go into a Rakdos sacrifice deck without the vampire theme, where you just want to sack other creatures to drain your opponent. You can use blood tokens to cycle through a deck or sacrifice them to drain stuff. And right, this goes great with stuff like what's it called? Morbid Opportunist, which is a card that I really overlooked at the beginning of the meta, but it's playable, right? It's this 3 mana 1/4, I think, or 1/3, that draws a card whenever another creature dies. And here you got another sack outlet. Let's say to any opponent. So I think Anja is a very playable card, very good stats. For Vampire Tribal, obviously really nice, with this added synergy of blood tokens. And then you got Strain Effect that can just finish off your opponent at a very good rate, at 2 mana, right? It's, I think this is a really solid, good, powerful card. Next up, we've got Gralnok, the Omnivore, 4 mana 3/3 legendary frog. Now that's amazing. Whenever a frog you control attacks, mill 3 cards. Whenever a permanent card is put into your graveyard from your library, exile it with a croak counter on it. You may play lands and cast spells from among cards you own in exile with croak counters on them. So this can actually give you a lot of card advantage if you mill your own deck. Right away, my gut feeling tells me this won't see constructed play. This is probably more for commander, but it's surely a fun little creature. And yeah, as I said, if your deck is mostly permanents, then this can give you a lot of card advantage if you mill yourself. But I just don't see this happening, right? It's a cool card, but I don't see how this is gonna fit in any deck. Next, I've got a wedding announcement. 3 mana and gem in white. At the beginning of your end step, put an invitation counter on wedding announcement. If you attack with 2 or more creatures this turn, draw a card. Otherwise, create a 1/1 white human creature token. Then, if wedding announcement has 3 or more invitation counters on, transform it, and the wedding festivity gives creatures you control +1/+1. So let's think about it. If you play this in a white weenie deck, right? Turn 2 you play a creature, turn 2 you play another creature or even 2 creatures, and then on turn 3, it can be fairly realistic to expect that you attack with 2 or more creatures. So you would put this down, you would draw a card at the beginning of your end step and put an invitation counter on it. And the next turn you would need to attack again, draw another card, or if you didn't attack you get a human creature token, and then turn after you get this effect once more, and then at the end step it transforms. Now that I think about this play pattern, I don't think this is going to see play. Simply because it's too slow. In a white weenie deck, you want to put tempo on the board, you want to be aggressive, and turn 3 you can play Raiden, you can play more of the Skyclaves, and yeah, this it's just too slow. This card is just way too slow. And even if it draws the cards in white, which is nice, but you really want to finish the game out fast with white weenie. I don't see this being played in there. Next we got Dominating Vampire. 3 mana 3/3 Vampire in red. When it enters the battlefield, gain control of target creature with mana value less than or equal to the number of vampires you control until the end of turn. Untap that creature, it gains haste. So this can momentarily steal a creature of your opponent, but it must be of a rather low CMC, but you know, early in the game, this shouldn't be a big deal. Also, there are a lot of tokens running around. So you can steal something momentarily, attack with it, and then you can sacrifice it to your Anja, for example, right? Or to another sacrifice effect. So yeah, I don't think this is a super powerful card in the free slot. Even if you play Reckless Vampires, I imagine you might still play something like a Reckless Stormseeker, because it's just such a good card at 3 mana in red. This might see play. If the vampire tribal like creature type is very important, you probably still would play this, but I don't think this is a super amazing card. If you have cheap sacrifice effects, it could be good. Other than that, doesn't seem that great. And now we've reached the mythics here. We Savior of Ollenbock. 3 mana 1/2 human soldier with training, so we already covered that. And whenever Savior of Ollenbock trains, exile up to 1 other type creature from the battlefield or creature card from a graveyard. When Savior of Ollenbock leaves the battlefield, put the exile cards on the battlefield under their owner's control. So what's interesting here is when this guy trains, you can exile any other creature on the battlefield. So obviously you can exile your opponent's creatures, but you can also exile your own if you want to have repeated enter the battlefield effects potentially. But you can also exile a creature card from a graveyard. And then when this guy leaves the battlefield, you put the exile cards on the battlefield under their owner's control. Now what's really cool with this card is that if this guy attacks and trains, you can exile a creature card from your graveyard. And then if your opponent blocks this and kills it, or if your opponent uses a removal spell, the card you exiled from your graveyard, the creature, comes back onto the battlefield, right? So you get a nice deal out of this. That being said, I don't know if this card would make the cut, because first off, you need another creature on the board with higher power, which is not too difficult, to be able to get the training trigger. And then obviously if you it has summoning sickness, so you don't get the effect right away. So at 3 mana we also got Brutal Kafar that can exile a creature card right away. I don't think this card is great. It's just a 3 mana 1/2 that needs a lot of support. It needs to wait a whole round, and I think in mono white you just need effects that are faster, right? I don't see this card getting anywhere in mono white, unfortunately, but I do like the design. I think the design is pretty cool, but I don't think it's gonna get there. And we're almost done. We've got Sorin, the Mirthless. So one new Planeswalker here. Sorin is back. 4 mana, 4 loyalty, Planeswalker in black, right? +1, look at the top card of your library. You may reveal that card and put it into your hand. If you do, you lose life equal to its mana value. -2, create a 2/3 black vampire creature with flying and lifelink. And -7, Sorin the Mirthless deals 13 damage and target. You gain 13 life. So let's analyze this Planeswalker. Let's take a look at the +1 first. So the +1, first of all, what's really cool is it's a May ability, right? So you can +1, take a look, and if you see like it's like a 5 mana value card and you're low on life, you say, no, I'm not taking the card, you don't have to pay the life. So that's cool, right? Another cool thing is, and what's really strange about a black Planeswalker having this, let's say, synergy, is that if you look at the top card of your library and it's a land card, it has 0 mana value. So then you put a land card in your hand, and you know, this way this black Planeswalker has some synergies with lands. That's really unusual. But apart from that, the +1 is let's face it, right? +1 is not that great. It's a May ability, but if you don't have significant life gain in your deck, this can hurt you a lot, like a lot, right? I mean, we're talking 4 mana value and up. This really hurts yourself. However, maybe if you play like a vampire deck, you might have a lower CMC and you might have a lot of life gain, and then it might be fine. Okay, so +1, can draw your card, can also fish useless lands from the top of your deck, so it's okay, but it's not amazing in my book. -2, create 2/3 black vampire creature token with flying lifelink. That's pretty cool. Flyer is nice, lifelink nice. The 3 toughness is right, you have, what's it called? We've got Frostbolt, although not a lot of people play it right now, but there is Frostbolt. There's also Dragonfire that kills this. So the 3 toughness is not great, but it's got flying, it's got lifelink, can do some work. And 2 power is also not great with trading. So the -2, not too. It's nice, you know, Thor can protect himself, that's good. But it's not super amazing. And then -7, deal 13, gain 13 life. That can obviously be a game ender. And I mean, the -7 is not too far away, right? This comes down if you plus him immediately. He's at 5 loyalty, then 6, then 7, and then you deal 13 damage. That's pretty okay, but where would you play this? Vampire Tribal could be a thing, right? Because you can make vampire tokens and draw cards easily from the top of your deck with 4 mana Planeswalker. That's pretty cool. But my instincts tell me I don't feel this Planeswalker. I think it's just okay. The token is decent. This guy can draw you cards. I mean, if you're in a Vampire Tribal deck, you can put this down at turn 4. It gives you another Vampire on the board. And then from there on, it draws you cards. I don't think it's too great. I just don't think it's that great. But if you get to the ultimate, that's pretty nice. But overall, my impression is that this is not going to be a great Planeswalker. And then final card for today, we got the Bride herself, Olivia Crimson Bride. 6 mana, 3/4 in Rakdos colors, Vampire Noble legendary creature with flying and haste. And whenever Olivia attacks, return target creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield tapped and attacking. It gains when you don't control legendary vampire, exile this creature. First of all, what's really nice, it has haste and it's a flyer, right? You have immediate value potentially, that's really, really great. That being said, it's got 4 toughness, and there are Ghostband Dragons in the format. So you can trade with Ghostband Dragons, that's pretty bad. But if you have creatures with entered battlefield effects, this can gain you a creature from your graveyard every turn, right? Which stays on the board as long as you control Olivia or another legendary vampire. So I think 6 mana is pretty hefty, but I could see this make like top end of a Vampire Tribal deck. Have like 2 of these at the top end. And it's like a finisher, right? You play her, she's got haste, you attack, you get something from a graveyard, which is also presumably flying and hasty. And then can get in for last bits of damage. So I think if I play a Tribal deck, this could see some play. And I think it's a decent card. And then makes up all the cards from today's spoiler for Innistrad Crimson Vow. That looks pretty cool so far. I'm really curious what the designers have in store for us the upcoming week, especially if they provide us with ways to deal with the Orange Epiphany deck, or if Orange Epiphany needs to be banned eventually. So I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I see you guys soon.